The recording is started.
Good. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm glad you got past all the technical problems, and it's great to see, actually be able to see people again after being holed up here for a while. I hope you're stay at home, you're following those stay at home instructions and making good use of your time, staying safe. It's been kind of hard. I've been talking to quite a few of the people, members, and it's finding the same thing. Everybody's getting a little bit cabin fever. So we've been trying this technology. We can't go to the shop, and so now we're trying a new address to meet, and that's the web address. That's how we're doing it now. We're going to try and use this technology for other things. We've done a few meetings like this, and hopefully we'll be able to go forward using the technology quite successfully. Gary's going to show us today how he makes putters. I've seen these things before, and I'm just amazed how they are. And he's agreed to share with us some of the techniques he has, and most importantly, for those of us who are not golfers, he's going to show us how he puts on that gorgeous finish. But before we get started on that, I want to just talk a little bit about the technology. We talked, you've heard Michael give you a few tips on this, but I just want to walk everybody through a few things on your screen, a few things that you should know before we get started. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. I think I can do that, Mike.
I think so.
Okay. Oops. Okay, there we go. I can't see this. Is my screen coming up?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and unfortunately, I cannot see the same thing you're seeing. So.
No, but what we're seeing is just your screen, Dallas. So you don't need to worry about what.
Well, I want to be able to show them how to do the different things. Are you able to see the, yeah, I'm just going to have to talk to you. Why don't you just go back to me and I'll just talk people through it.
Okay.
Can I answer? There we go. Okay, thank you. So guys, there's a few things you should know about your screen. First of all, in the lower left-hand corner, if you bring your mouse down, you'll see a button down there that says start and stop video. Right now, everybody's mic is on mute, except for mine and Mike's, Michael's. But if you you're willing to share your screen and share with everybody else, you can hit that start video and it'll come up on the screen. We are recording today, so if you don't want to be heard and recorded, or if you don't want to have your picture on our video, you can stop the recording and you can mute yourself and you can just listen in without participating, but it will limit your ability to participate. A couple other features we want you to know about in the bottom of your screen. Once again, you'll see something that says participants. If you click on that, you'll see on the right-hand side, you get a little pop-up and it gives a list of everybody who's participating on this in the conference. And also you'll see at the very bottom, you'll see something that says mute me. That's another place where you can do mute. And you can do another thing that says raise hand on the right-hand side. As we get a little further down in the session at the end of Gary's presentation, if you want to ask a question of Gary, you'll be able to raise your hand and Michael will acknowledge you, open up your mic and allow you to ask a question at that point. So if you want to do that, you can just raise your hand. If you just click on that, you'll see a hand pop up and we'll know that you would like to speak. The other thing you can do at the bottom of your screen, going back to the bottom of the screen, you see at the right-hand side, you'll see something that says reactions. And on that, you can, there's little hands clapping. That's a place for applause. If you want to applaud something Gary's saying, you can do that. Or if you just want to give affirmation, you can do a thumbs up just by clicking a thumbs up. How about everybody try doing a thumbs up? Just give us a thumbs up. Give that a try. Come on, Kurt, I don't see you with your hand up. Okay, we've got quite a few that are doing it, some aren't, but in the meantime, you know that it's there and you're aware of what can be done. And then lastly, when we get a little more sophisticated on it, you'll have the ability to chat. You'll be able to, there's a chat button on the bottom. You can click on that And you'll see at the bottom, you can see a message already from Paul that says, good morning, everybody, and another one from Travis with a good morning. But if you want to send a message to the entire group just by text or through the chat box, you can do that. So with that, I think that's enough information to get us started, and I think we can move forward without any further discussion on it. Gary's putters are just amazing, and I'm really happy he's sharing some of his techniques. I've seen a little bit of it yesterday, and I want to see it again today. But if you haven't seen one in person, it's just truly stunning, the finish he gets on that and the feel that they have when you touch them. You're going to see a picture of it here in a minute, but when you get a chance, I know at the holiday sale you had a couple he donated, and I got a chance to play with then. And I had to ask myself, how in the world does he do that? And today we're going to get a chance to see a few of his trade secrets. So with that, let's turn it over to Gary and take it away, Gary. Thank you for doing it.
Oops, sorry.
Gary never looks so good.
Yeah, Gary never looks so good. Sorry about that. Well,
Good morning, Elizabeth. There we go.
wrong one.
Let's go to the other camera to start with, Mike.
We're working on this here. It's there's a small technical issue, but we'll get there.
That's all right. I can talk while you're working on it. Well, good morning, everybody. And let me add my welcome to all of you. We're excited and delighted to be doing our first online SIG. And hopefully it will be the first of many get-togethers like this. I want to extend a special welcome to Marlo Olson, who's joining us from Prescott. Marlo was an important part of our team and moved away and moved to Prescott, but we're excited that he's staying in touch with us and joining us this morning. And then we've got David Weissman in Milwaukee, Wisconsin this morning. He gets the award for having traveled the furthest to this get-together. So David, thank you again for joining us and for all you did for us in January and February while you were out here. And as we look at potential applications of this in the future, you were the first guy I thought of when we started brainstorming how we might be able to extend the use of this platform. So please give that some thought. And if you would like to put on something like this, we would love to hear from you. I also want to thank Dallas for overselling the introduction, but also for coming up with this idea. He called me a couple of weeks ago and said, you know, some of our members are already climbing the walls, or we got to do something to help people out during this period of time that we've got the shop closed. And he's the one that came up with this idea. And he went to Jim McGeehan, who went out and found Zoom for us. And then we roped Mike Lewis, our IT guy, who is steering things today to help them put it together. And Travis got involved and gave us a lot of tips on how to do this and get the most. So thank you to that entire crew for putting this together. We hope it will become something that we can do more of, assuming that it is valuable to you, which leads me to my next comment, which is just that, is we hope that you'll find this of value today. And one way or the other, we'd appreciate any and all feedback that you can give us on what you like, what you didn't like, as well as any ideas you have on how we might further use this moving ahead. The purpose this morning is quite simply to give you an excuse to completely forget about the madness going on outside the walls of the house for an hour and get back and focus on woodworking and have some fun thinking about what your next project might be. There's nothing particularly remarkable about why I was picked to do this. I was the only one that volunteered, so that's why you have me, but hopefully we'll have lots of volunteers in the future. And again, it's not meant to be something spectacular in terms of a presentation. Many woodworkers specialize in a particular item that they like to make, and they make them over and over again and get pretty good at it and develop some expertise, at least some experience. And mine happens to be wood golf putters. About 15 or 20 years ago, I made my first one. I was a golfer, needed a new putter, I decided, and like any good woodworker, I said, well, I ought to be able to make one. So I went to work on it. And after 2 or 3 iterations, got one that worked and have been developing them ever since. Along the line, a lady that runs a gift shop in Arizona saw them and asked if she could have some to sell in her store. So I've been selling every one that I've made through her store ever since. And over the years, I've made well over 1,000 of these things. So I don't hold myself out as an expert in woodworking or finishing, but I can tell you I've made enough putters to know a little bit about how to do it, and most importantly, what not to do. So while I am going to walk you through the process of making a wood putter this morning and how to put a polyurethane finish on it, I understand that most of you aren't planning on running out and building a wood putter. So I'll try to capture the tools and tips and techniques that I've learned over the years of making a lot of putters and share them with you in hopes that they transfer to some of the other projects that you might be making that I think they're also applicable to. So in just a minute, I'm going to go through the steps of actually constructing the putter. But before we get started on that, let me talk just a moment about the finish, because I think a lot of you have probably signed in this morning because you're interested in learning how to do a polyurethane high gloss finish, which is what I put on these putters. To begin with, for those of you that are relatively new to woodworking, and we've got some new woodworkers on this morning, this is probably not where you want to start your finishing career. Finishing is a bugaboo. I've always thought of finishing as kind of one of the weak links in my skill set. But over time, again, just by repetition, as I mentioned, I've gotten pretty good at putting polyurethane on putters. So I'll tell you how to do that and how to get a nice, smooth, high gloss finish. But it's not easy. It requires a lot of steps and it requires a lot of practice, quite frankly. So if you're new to woodworking, you might want to start with something that's a whole lot more simple, like an oil finish. You can just wipe on a coat of Watco and let it set and wipe it off, and you're one and done. Because this is a lot more complex than that. But for those of you that are up to the challenge, I will go ahead and walk you through how it's done. And I look forward to your feedback as you experiment with it and see what you can come up with. And if you have additional challenges or questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me and ask me. Again, this is just one man's projects and ideas, and we hope that as you're watching this, you'll be thinking in terms of what I could share on a future Zoom meeting or SIG, online SIG that we have, because we'd like to continue this, assuming it's of value to you. And of course, we need people to do that. So keep that in mind as well. All right, let's go ahead, Mike, and switch to the other camera, and we'll start talking about putters and how to build them. And then once we get one built, we'll go ahead and talk about the finish. Mike, you gonna switch over to the other camera for us, or have you?
At least on my video, we have switched over to the other big camera.
Okay, all I'm seeing is a San Diego Fine Woodworkers logo, but as long
Oh,
as
that you're just looking at me.
that's all that matters. Okay, good. Rick Van Hatten, if you can see the putter, put your thumb up in the video. Okay, good. All right, let's go ahead and get started. What you're looking at right now is a putter that I put the what I thought was going to be the last coat on last night, and I've got something right in the middle of my screen. There we go. Okay. As I checked it this morning, it's still got just a couple of little hiccups in it, so I'll give it one more coat, but it will give you an idea anyway of the full glass, smooth shine that you can put on a piece of wood if you're determined enough and you follow some basic steps on how to use polyurethane. But this is what a finished putter looks like. If you're not familiar with a putter, it's got its body. I've got a center stripe. Most golfers like a center stripe in there to help them aim their shot. And then there is what we call a face plate on the front of it. And then there's also a sole plate on the bottom of the putter. So I'll walk you through the steps on how to go ahead and do that. The first step in building a putter, or really anything else, is to pick out the material you want to use. This is a piece of olive. It's a nice looking piece of olive that would be pretty typical of something I would consider building a putter out of. But I wanted to take a moment and talk about the importance on a small item like this, or really any item that you want to build, but it seems to have heightened importance the smaller the item is. And that's to make sure that when you're looking at a large piece of wood, you can properly image or picture in your mind's eye what it's going to look like, the small piece of it that you're going to use in a particular item that you're building. So in other words, if you look at this, it's a nice looking piece of wood. But depending on how you cut it up and which part of it you use to build a putter out of, it's not necessarily going to look the way it looks right now, and it's not going to create the impression that you want. Selling these putters commercially, I've learned from experience that you want the highest amount of figure and activity going on that you can. And as you can see, if you look at this and think about it, some parts of this piece of wood lend themselves more than other parts. So what I've learned to do over the years is to use what I call a negative template. I used to use a template like this that is in the shape of the putter, but obviously that keeps you from seeing the part of the wood you're going to use. So I do just the reverse and I cut it out and I use this piece. So what this allows you to do is to move this around and decide, rather than just cut this piece into 4 pieces and try to get 4 putters out of it, how can I cut a particular part out of the piece of wood that will give it the most character and most visual interest? So I might want to include both. I might want to incorporate both of those knots in the putter. Maybe I want to just put one in the far end of the putter, so do it like that. Maybe I don't want to do anything at all. But now here's the hazard, just cutting it into 4 pieces. If you do that, you're going to wind up with one putter that looks like that, which is obviously very blasé. So the point of all of this is the use of a template for something like this can give you a lot of different ideas in terms of how you want to design the putter or whatever you're building. I use this also for the live edge and wooden and resin jewelry that we do, which it really comes into play for. So just a tip on how to use a negative template to get the most out of the piece of wood that you're considering. So let's go ahead and start to construct the putter. This is a nice looking piece of spalted tamarind that I'm going to use to make a putter out of. And I've already cut it into the basic shape, which is about 2.5 inches wide and about 4.5 inches long. And typically most of the stock that you have is like 3/4 of an inch thick, and we'll talk a little bit more about the thickness in a few moments. But once you have the piece that you want that's got the character you want, then you want to cut it in half and put a center strip in it. My recommendation is make the center strip as much of a contrast as possible. It will make it the most striking in appearance as compared to, using maple or something light colored unless you want something dark. You can do a lot of different things depending on how creative you want to be. I laminated a bunch of pieces together and then cut them up, so I've got some center strips that I can use that look like this. Another way to add just a little bit of pizzazz or zip to your design is to put in a piece of veneer on either side of the center strip so that you get a nice, it kind of sets off the center stripe, if you will. So that's just another technique. Once you've got all of that figured out and put together, then you just want to epoxy all the pieces together and put clamping pressure on this to hold it together until the epoxy sets. You do want to use epoxy. You don't want to use yellow glue. And the reason for that is that when we get into finishing, I've learned the hard way that polyurethane does not stick to yellow glue. So if you've got any kind of glue line there, and even if you've got a perfect joint and don't have a glue line, if in the process of clamping some of that yellow glue got infused into the wood, when you try to put polyurethane over it, it will not stick. And you'll wind up with a little white or a little demarcation where there's no polyurethane against the rest of the polyurethane, and it will be very visible. So simple way to get around that is just to use epoxy to put your pieces together. So step one is to go ahead and assemble the body of the putter and clamp it up and set it aside to dry overnight. Next morning, you'll wind up with a finished body that looks like this. And then the next step is to put the sole plate on. I typically use walnut for the sole plate. And obviously what you want to do is just glue it onto the bottom of your finished putter body. But the real objective here, the sole plate does a number of things, including adding strength to the assembly that you've already glued together. But the other thing that you need the sole plate for is to give yourself enough thickness that you're going to be able to mortise out a cavity to put the weight in. We're going to talk more about that in a moment. So if you're taking notes and actually want to build a putter, you need to wind up with a finished piece like this that's going to be at least 1.25 inches thick to give you enough room to put the mortise in the face. I'll show you in a moment, and still have enough strength on the top and the bottom of the putter. So epoxy that onto the body, set that aside to dry overnight. Next morning you'll come in and you'll have a finished piece, and obviously I'm moving from one to another, so they're not exactly the same wood, but the point is you'll have a finished block that now is the body of the putter, and you've got a sole plate on it, and you've got enough thickness here to go ahead and mortise an opening so that you can weight your putter. A golf putter needs to be a total of about at least 12 or 13 ounces in weight. This block right here probably weighs 4 or 5 ounces, so you've got to add some weight to it. The way I do that is I cut a cavity in the face of the putter. So this is going to be the front of the putter right here. So I'm going to tip it up, I'm going to put it on the mortising machine, and you can use a drill press. This just gives you a little bit more full use of the space by drilling a square hole or a square rectangle. This is a 1/2 inch across. It's a 1/2 inch mortising bit. I do it 2 inches long and 1.5 inches deep. And that gives me just the right amount of space to pour molten lead in there that will wind up giving me about 7 or 8 ounces of weight to add to the putter. So that's the next step, is to go ahead and melt some lead and pour it in there. You could also buy just a lead ingot and cut it into a rectangle and drop it in. I found it's a little easier to just go ahead and pour it. And to pour it, Mike, if you want to switch back to the other camera.
We're there.
This is how we do that. It's a propane torch, which probably everybody has in their garage. All you have to do is turn it on, put some lead into a soup ladle, make sure you've got a handle of some kind to protect you from the heat that's going to be generated, and simply hold this ladle over the propane torch that you've ignited, which my wife made it a point of ensuring that I would not ignite it this morning here in the den. But if you hold that there for just 30 to 45 seconds, it will melt whatever lead you put in there, and you'll get it into a molten state. When you do, you can just pour it into that cavity that you've mortised out. Let's go ahead and go back to the putter. By the way, for lead, you can buy lead and cut it up and melt it yourself. You can cut the ingot up and slip it into the crevice as I indicated. You can get lead from just about anywhere. Old fishing lures work really well. What does not work particularly well is trying to melt down buckshot. I've had a friend or two give me that, and it's got some other stuff in it. It does not melt down very well as compared to just a fishing sinker or just raw lead. So anyway, that's how you add weight to the putter. And what you're going to wind up with is something that looks like this, and you sand it down smooth, and then you're ready for the next step, which is to put a face plate or a strike plate on the front of the putter. I use ebony for almost all of my face plates. This is a piece of ebony. It's got a nice solid black look to it. The only drawback to it is it's expensive, but it's also extremely hard, and for that reason is a perfect choice for a putter face plate. And once again, I epoxy this on to the rest of the putter body and let it set up overnight. And you've now got a completed putter body, and you're ready to go on to the next step, which is to go ahead and cut out the basic shape of the putter. And again, you go back to your template, lay it on there, draw it out, and just cut it out on the bandsaw or the scroll saw or what have you. And you'll wind up with basic shape of your putter, which winds up looking like this. So now the challenge is you want to round this off, both on the top and the bottom. I've not found an easy, simple way to do this. I've tried to do it with a router and without success. And it's obviously, you can imagine there's some safety implications of trying to do it with a router. So what I do is I take it and I have a 6-inch belt sander that's got a horizontal bed on it. And I literally, if you can picture this white part being the moving sandpaper, I literally just hold this against the sandpaper and then just tip it back and forth while turning it through the entire perimeter of the putter. And eventually you wind up with a nice rounded shape on the top, and then you just flip it over and do the same thing on the bottom. And what you wind up with, if you do all of that properly, is something that looks approximately like this. And now you finish that up by taking it over to the bench and pulling out your rasp and just going ahead and finish. When you do this on a belt sander, you'll get close, but you'll still have some bumps and lumps. And if you take the rasp and just follow it down these contours and take your time and work toward a perfectly smooth surface, eventually you'll wind up with a nice consistent and concentric shape around the perimeter of your putter. Those of you that are ignorant in the ways of hand tools, as am I, if you're thinking that all rasps are created equal, Doug Lesnar turned me on to a Lee Nielsen rasp recently, and boy, it's like I'm like a kid with a new toy. It's like night and day. So if you don't have yourself a good rasp and you're going to work wood with a rasp, by all means consider spending the extra money and getting a good one, because it's time well spent. So now we're just about ready to put the finish on. The other thing that you want to do is you want to drill a pilot hole here. This is where the shaft for the finished putter is going to go. This is a finished putter, and you can see where the shaft goes in. For right now, we're going to use this just to grab hold of the putter while we're doing the finishing, but just so you have a sense of how you're going to finish this. If you actually want to build a putter, eventually you'll drill that to the size of this shaft, epoxy the shaft in place, put a grip on the other end of your shaft, and now you've got a completed golf putter. But in the interim, you still have to put finish on the putter. And to do that, you need to be able to hold it while you're applying the finish. And that's what that pilot hole is going to be for. Once you're ready to go ahead and finish, this is what you're going to put into that pilot hole. And this is nothing more than the handle of one of the foam brushes that I use to apply the finish. I use a 1-inch foam brush to apply finish to the putter head. And I cut the head off, a bunch of them, drilled a hole in one end. Then I took drywall screws, cut the head off the drywall screw, epoxied the drywall screw into the hole, and then you wind up with something that you can twist into this putter head, and it becomes a handle that you can hang on to while you're applying the finish to the putter head, which is essential, so that you can apply finish to the entire surface without having to touch it. So that's what that's all about. All right, so now it's time to go ahead and apply the finish. So let's talk a little bit about how we're going to do that. First of all, and by the way, if you haven't figured this out by now, we're going to do the whole presentation and then give you the chance to ask questions. So if you got questions, please jot them down so that you don't forget them as I do, and we'll take them in just a few minutes here when I finish up. Okay, what kind of finish do I use? This is my finish of choice. It's Minwax clear gloss polyurethane. Make sure you get the clear gloss. It comes in a variety of finishes, and you want the clear gloss for a putter head. And it's fast drying, which is important because you'll want to be able to put 2 or 3 coats on a day. To get a finish like I showed you, you're going to need to do a minimum of 10 or 12 coats. So you can see that why you might want a fast drying finish. And it also allows you to get it to dry out before it begins to drip or to run. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Okay, so let's go back to actually applying the finish. I take the finish out of the can and I put it into a small squeeze bottle like this, just to make it easier to handle and to apply. What I do is I shoot just a little bit into the bottom of a plastic cup like this, and then I apply it, as I mentioned, with a 1-inch foam brush. There's several important things to remember to get a good finish. So let me list as many of them as I can. And some of you that have been doing this for a long time are probably going to walk away and say, well, he really didn't give me anything I didn't already know about all the steps involved in doing a finish correctly. And that may be true. But the one thing I've found out over these years is you got to do all of them every time. Okay, you can't skip steps because that's where you get into trouble, and that's where you wind up without a smooth finish and with little nibs and so on and so forth. So the first step is to prepare the surface. Now, let me take that back. First step is to get fresh product. For many, many years, my approach to finishing was when I needed polyurethane or varnish, I just went into the paint cabinet, found the old can of varnish, and I shook it. And if it sloshed, then I was in business and I went ahead and used that product. Well, I found out that's a big mistake. And I found out that fresh product is absolutely essential to attaining the kind of finish that we're talking about here. So I understand that nobody likes to throw out a half a can of old finish, but that's exactly what you need to do with it, because when you start your next project, you want to start with fresh product. I have noticed that because these are transparent squeeze bottles, I can tell by the color as it gets old. Even after 2 or 3 weeks, you can see it begin to go from a corn oil-like color to like a maple syrup kind of color. And when it gets into maple syrup, you'll start to realize and you'll start to experience difficulties and problems in applying the finish that you don't have when you're using fresh finish. So like I say, bite the bullet, get yourself a fresh can of finish, and then go to work. Beyond that, the most important thing and the next important step is to make sure you're starting with a smooth and well-prepared surface. Once you finish shaping the putter head, you need to sand it. I go through 3 grades of sandpaper. I start with either 60 or 80, then I go to either 120 or 150, whatever I have, and then I wind up with 220. And that will get you to where you need to be in terms of smoothness. The next thing you need to do is make sure you remove all dust. Wipe it down with paper or a rag, and then wipe it down thoroughly with a tack rag. And I actually use 2 tack rags. I start with an old tack rag that I've been using for a while, and then I try to keep a fresh tack rag handy to make sure I get every bit of dust off. And then go ahead and pour some finish into the cup, dip the foam brush into it, and go ahead and apply it. The way I apply it, and I toyed with doing this live this morning, but the camera angle just doesn't allow me to really show you what I want to show you. But I start with the edges. So I actually start here and I just slowly turn the head around, dragging the brush lightly against the surface all the way around. And then I do it again a little bit lower down. Point is, start with the edges, then do the bottom, and then do the top. Always do the surface that's going to show the most last, okay? And that will give you the opportunity to clean up any runs or drips that may have gotten on the surface, and to focus on making sure that that one surface in particular looks as good as any of them will. So, assuming that we've now applied the finish to this, we've got to somehow keep it from running. And obviously with a surface like this, for any of you that have applied varnish or any finish really to a surface like this, if you don't do something, it's going to run on you. Obviously, it's going to run down the curved sides of this to the bottom surface. So how do you get around that? Well, I found a very elegant solution that was given to me by a friend of mine that used to wrap and finish fishing poles. So let me share that with you. Michael, if you want to go back to the other camera.
Okay. We're working on it.
Are we there?
We're working on it.
Okay.
He says.
This is where you say technical difficulties. Please stand.
Yes. Please stand by here. Yeah.
Everybody's behaving. I see images, several images, and nobody's dozed off just yet. There's one that's close, but so far. Okay, this is. Can
This
anybody-
is, for some reason, is
Right,
not switching over. There we go.
Okay.
Thank you, George.
So, what this is the motor, the rotisserie motor off of your old barbecue. Now, most of you have one of these in a garage. If you don't, I'll guarantee you that one of your family members or one of your neighbors does, and it's probably just sitting there gathering dust. And if you mount it on a piece of wood, and then you put a little brace out here, you can take this putter that's now attached to this slick handle that I showed you how to build, and you just slip it into the opening in the rotisserie motor, and you turn it on. And now what that does, as you can see, is it turns it slowly but consistently and keeps the finish moving, or it keeps it from running down to a low point, because the low point keeps changing. And it just by happenstance is the perfect number of RPMs to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. And you just either remember to unplug this or do what I do, since I can't remember anything anymore. I put it on a timer and set it for 30 minutes. And by the end of 30 minutes, the finish is well dry. And I've got a perfectly even coat of finish on the putter. Okay. All right, we can go back to the other camera now, Michael. Let me give you some other tips on finishing. One of the things that you'll note, and I don't know if you can see it on here, but we'll take a shot at this, is that this particular putter head has had just a couple of coats of finish. And by the way, every time you give it a coat, before you give it the next coat, you want to sand it down with 220. And as some of you know, or most of you know, the process is one of just leveling out the mountaintops and putting more finish into the valleys until you finally get to where things are perfectly smooth. But what you'll find when you apply your first couple of coats of finish is the problems or the recesses or the grain will show where you need to put some fill. And there's a couple of ways. I don't know if you can see the fill or not, or see the grain or not on this center stripe is what I'm trying to capture. I'm not having much success doing it with the light or lack of light that we've got. But right here at the top of this center stripe, you can see some pretty pronounced grain, okay? Now there's two ways of handling that. You can put on about 15 or 20 coats of finish and keep sanding between each one, and eventually it will get smooth as the grain fills in with finish. Or you can expedite the process. Well, I don't have much patience, so expediting is always my chosen approach. There you can see now you can see the grain right in there. What I use for filling grain and small flaws in the wood is super glue. And I usually use medium weight super glue or the thick super glue. And all you have to do is just put a little dab on here like that. And then you take a strip of playing card. See the dab of super glue there? Okay, and then you just take a playing card and just smooth it out like that. And it smooths the surface and it fills in the grain. And then if you're really impatient, as I am, the next thing you want to do is take your can of accelerator that you buy at Rockler, which is designed to make super glue dry right away. And you spray it just lightly like that. And that will allow that super glue to set up almost instantly. Which allows you to go ahead then and take the 220 grit sandpaper, which I forgot to bring in here, sand off the excess glue above the grain, and you'll wind up with a perfectly smooth surface so you can go ahead and apply your next coat of the finish, okay? Just it's essentially using super glue instead of wood filler. The benefit that that has is the super glue is clear. The other thing you can use is epoxy, which is also clear. I don't like using wood filler because to me you see the wood filler and it just looks like exactly what it is it's, you know, it's a different color. Epoxy is also clear, it just takes longer to set up. And this sets up instantly and allows you to go right back to sanding and applying your next coat of finish. So at this stage, you're now at a point where you just keep adding coats, sanding with 220 in between until the very end. And at the end, you might want to go to 320 before you apply the final coat. The other thing that's important to note is that in addition to having a squeeze bottle full of finish like this, is to have a squeeze bottle full of mineral spirits, and you can use it to thin the finish. I don't recommend thinning it the first 2-3 coats, but after that you want to start adding thinner to it and make it thinner and thinner. When you put that final coat on, you want a pretty high percentage, maybe 20 to 25% paint thinner in with your polyurethane, so you got a real thin coating that you can apply, and it just seems to go on much smoother and create a higher shine than a thicker coat does, and it's easier to put on. So let me see if I've missed anything here. Oh yeah, a couple of other things. If you wind up with little nibs or the surface isn't perfectly smooth, here's some of the things that you've done incorrectly or you may have been guilty of. Is not, number one, not wiping all the dust off, but bubbles, small bubbles will emerge. The thing that creates those bubbles is an inappropriate or the incorrect procedure for applying the finish. For one thing, you want to move the brush very slowly. Okay? It's very easy to try to, you know, just go ahead and put it on as fast as you can, and that's what will create bubbles. So move the brush very slowly around the putter head or whatever surface you're doing, and the other thing is a very light touch. The third thing that's also an important part, a lot of things to keep track of at one time, is to have the right amount of finish in the brush. If you don't have enough finish, you're going to wind up with brush marks. So if you're getting brush marks, either you don't have enough finish or it's not thinned enough, it's too thick. Conversely, if you get too much finish in the brush, you'll have runs and you'll be mopping up runs off the bottom of it. So that takes a little practice. There's just no substitute for experimenting with it. So I would urge you, before you go to finish your prime piece of wood, is make a practice piece along at the same time that you're making the product that you want to finish perfectly, and use that practice piece to practice your brush technique, because that's got a lot to do with eliminating all of those bubbles. If you do all of those things, you're going to wind up with a very smooth finish. And after that final coat, you won't need to polish or do anything to take anything out, because everything will be gone. You'll have a perfectly smooth finish. I think that's it. So let me pause there and thank you for your undivided attention. You've been a very quiet group. And go ahead and ask Mike to turn it open, to open the mics, and let everybody ask whatever questions.
I have unmuted and remuted everybody. If you want to talk, there's too many. I can't see everybody at once. So just unmute yourself and you can talk, and then please remute it when we're done.
Great presentation.
Yeah, it was enjoyable.
Barry, I saw some questions on the screen. Someone asked why you used lead. Would any other metal work? You're muted, Gary.
Unmute yourself, Gary.
Yeah.
I didn't mute myself. Michael muted me.
Hey, it's always a tech.
Never me.
I muted you?
I did it.
The answer to the question is I've only been successful using lead. You've got to add at least 7 ounces. And if you try to add 7 ounces of anything other than lead, it's going to take a lot more room than the cavity that I showed you. And there just isn't room for a much larger cavity. So that would be the downside. Lead is very easy to work with. Don't be afraid of using lead. It's extremely easy to use. It's extremely easy to find. Like I say, old fishing weights will work just fine. And just have a fan behind you when you melt it down so you blow the fumes away from you, not sniff them up your own nostrils. But other than that, it works well. You also need the fan on because when you pour the molten lead into the cavity, you get a little bit of smoke from the wood, right around the edges starting to burn, but it doesn't show. I mean, it's within, it just creates a little bit of an odor until it blows away. But don't be afraid of trying the lead thing.
Gary, the other question I see on the screen is about what type of epoxy you use.
I use West Systems, which you can get at Rockler, although it's very expensive to buy it at Rockler. I buy it down at West Marine down in Point Loma. It's still expensive. It probably cost you $100 to buy the 2 parts of it, but that'll last you a long time unless you're doing an awful lot of gluing. But really, I have a high level of confidence that you can find a smaller quantity of epoxy at Home Depot or any place like that, the 2-part epoxy that will work just as well. West System has a system where they have those pumps. You buy 2 cans. One is the resin and the other is the thing that makes it cure. And they have a pump for the top of both cans, and they're premium pumps. So you just put a cup underneath the thing, you hit the pump once, you go to the other can, you hit the pump once, and you've got exactly the right mixture. And then all you have to do is stir it, so it just makes it a lot easier. Yeah. That's the one I use.
Hey, Gary.
Go ahead.
This is Dwayne. I have a question regarding the using accelerator on the super glue. I've had experience where accelerator can cloud the super glue. Have you had any problems with that?
Well, it does. When you first put it on, it's cloudy, and when you sand it, even it can be cloudy. Once you put the polyurethane over the top of it, it's fine. The cloudiness goes away. You don't even see it. Now, you do want to sand it down to where you get all of the unnecessary super glue off. So all you've got left is the super glue that's in the depression that you're trying to fill. You don't want super glue spread across the top of the rest of your surface.
Hey, Gary.
Thank you.
What kind of polyurethane? Is it water-based or oil-based?
It's oil-based. I've tried water-based, and I've never had luck with water-based. The other thing that I've tried is wipe-on. Wipe-on poly to deal with. Before I found this spinning gizmo, I thought that might solve the running problem. But the problem with wipe-on for me, and maybe I just don't know enough about how to do it, is you just don't wind up with much of a coat. It's a very, very thin coat.
Well, wipe-on is just simply diluted polyurethane.
Yeah, it is. But to wipe it on and have it not run, you got to wipe on a very, very thin coat.
Right. Gary, you did talk about the rest of a putter for those of us who are non-golfers, the shaft or the handle, and is there different lengths?
You can, that's a good question if you're a golfer, if you're actually going to make one of these. There's a standard length, and I just use the putter shaft the way it comes. It's at the right length. So I don't have to worry about that. The other thing is different people want different lengths, and I just make them a standard length. And if they want a longer one or a shorter one, they can have it cut or made longer at their local pro shop and a new grip put on, and nobody's the wiser.
So do you get those from a local retailer, or are you
I order them from a wholesaler in Los Angeles, but you can buy them at Golf Mart or any of the local retailers that have a club making capability. The one down at Mission Valley Golf Mart will have that for you.
How do you get the right angle on it, Gary?
It comes bent to the correct angle. It's called a double bend putter shaft, and the angle is already calculated in it.
But you can drill the hole.
Pardon me?
You have to drill the hole, though.
You have to drill the hole, and it's a perpendicular hole. So that's the benefit of buying that double bend putter shaft, is the bend is already in the shaft. All you have to do is drill a perpendicular hole with your drill press. And
is there a certain spot you should be drilling, like more towards the center of the putter versus the end of it, that matters, or is it just kind of just eyeball it?
It really doesn't matter. I used to think it did. I used to go to great lengths. These are great questions, by the way. I used to go to great lengths to put it exactly where I thought it should be. I noticed when I was shopping putters at a store that they're all over the board. There really is, one of the things I've learned from this is there is no standard when it comes to putter sizes or angles or shapes or anything else. So I just try to put it up there in the corner because that's where most of them seem to be. Now, that said, I have made a different shape putter that was more of a block shaped putter. And I put the shaft right into the middle of the putter head. And I put it was a straight shaft, and I put it at an angle. And to Chris's question on how do you get the right angle, I experimented with another block of wood and kept drilling a hole at different angles until I found the one that I felt good to me as a golfer standing over the thing when I was holding it.
Gary, have you used different face angles on the front of the putter?
That's a good question too, and I knew that would come up. I do not attempt to do that. To me, intuitively, it ought to be 90 degrees. But putter manufacturers try to make them approximately 2 degrees. Some of them advertise that it's a 3-degree putter or 1-degree putter or whatever. My answer to that is any golfer that tells you that he can tell the difference is a lying dog, okay?
It's interesting.
Lion, pie-faced, pony soldier, whatever Biden's term is. No amateur golfer, and I seriously question whether a professional golfer can even tell the difference between 1 degree and no degrees. To me, when you strike the ball, you want it to go smoothly along the grass. But the reason manufacturers put a 1 or 2 degree angle on it is that they say they want you to launch the ball initially for the first 12 or 14 inches, and then it rolls out. I've never had a problem just using a straight putter, and I use one, by the way, that I've used for 15 years. And while I'm not a great golfer, I am a good golfer, and it works fine, and it's perfectly perpendicular. But you can angle it back a degree or two if you wish, and if you've got the temperament and skill to do it to that level of precision, more power to you. But that's what most of the professional ones are, is 1 or 2 degrees back of straight up.
And do you have a link where you sell these that we could look into maybe purchasing them at all?
I do not. I used to have a website, and I've been going to put it back up, and I just have never gotten onto it. So if you want to have a look at one, let me know, and I'll be happy to show you one and show you how to build it.
Do you recommend any other wood other than ebony for the faceplate?
Yeah, it can be anything that's hard. You could use maple, is obviously very hard. I used to use Coca-Cola because I always love Coca-Cola because it's always got some striking grain and some movement in it, and it makes for a very attractive faceplate. But I developed an allergy to Coca-Cola. I can't use Coca-Cola anymore. I had to give away the stuff that I had. But yeah, anything hard will work. And again, that's just a matter of personal taste. I also make different shape putters. I don't have any handy right here, but there's nothing magical about the shape of this particular putter. And if you go on to a putter manufacturer's or retailer's website, you'll see all kinds of different shapes now. They've gotten pretty exotic with designs for different putters.
I think I recall seeing one of yours where you can pick up the golf ball with it.
Yeah, I was just looking to see if I had one here so I could show you, and I don't. But I do have one that has a hole right in the center of it, and exactly the diameter of a golf ball so that you can ease it down over the golf ball. If you miss the putt and you're only 6 inches from the cup, rather than bend over to pick up the golf ball, which is what everybody else has to do, you can just slide this over it and friction would grab it and you could lift up the putter and remove the ball rather than bend over to have to pick up the ball. That was an interesting design, or is an interesting design, because I was fascinated by the thin tolerance that you have to hit on the diameter of that hole. That hole has to be perfect. And I mean, you know, I used to round it out with a spindle sander that was an inch, and I used to draw it out, and then I used to just, you know, ease my way into it till I got right there. And if you just go one too many times around with that spindle sander, it gets so big that it won't pick up the ball anymore. So it's a very fine tolerance. So if you try that, be forewarned, you got to be right on. And of course, once you go past, there's no going back. So
Those little circle like inlays that you have on that one, did you do that before you assembled the whole head, or is that something you added afterwards?
I add, that's a good question too. I add that afterwards, after I get it shaped, but before I start finishing. So I'll get it rough shaped. I'll at least do the filing part, and then I'll drill holes, and then I'll put, it's brass rod is all it is. Just put a little piece of brass rod in there, epoxy it in or super glue it in, let it set, and then just touch it on the belt sander and smooth it down so it's perfectly smooth, and it makes a real nice accent. And the same thing applies to the turquoise. I don't know if you all saw this. Are we on the, which image are we on, Michael? Can we?
The one you want to be.
Okay. You can see I put turquoise in some of these because I sell these at a gift shop in Arizona. Of course, people in Arizona want something to take back that is Arizona-like or representative of Arizona. So anything with turquoise in it sells a lot faster than anything that does not have it. So same thing, I'll pour turquoise in there.
So is that just like crushed turquoise or?
Powdered turquoise. It's beyond
Powdered
crushed.
turquoise?
It's actually powdered, yeah.
Okay, nice.
And that's
Do you seal that up with CA glue?
Pardon me?
Do you just seal that with CA glue? Like you put the powder in and put CA glue in to hold it all in, or?
I do. That's exactly what I do. And then just sand it down. It's that simple, and it makes a really nice, attractive feature to add to it. And it's a good way to get rid of a void.
So Gary, is there any science to, you know, where that the hole for the weight is, you know, width or height or anything on that?
There really isn't. I used to think there was, but I've seen them so many, you know, different locations that obviously there's not. And from a standpoint of as a golfer, I've picked up different ones, and you know, putters have different feels depending on a variety of issues, and that's just one of them. It can be the weight, it can be the shape, it can be, you know, a number of different things, the grip on the end of the shaft. So it's not a particular deal breaker one way or the other, in my opinion. Okay, well, thanks.
What are the total dimensions that you end up with at the end of it?
This is about 4 1/4 inches long and about 2 3/8 inches wide, this particular shape. I have, I went up to the shop the other day just to make sure it was still there, and it is. This is the good news. It misses you, by the way. I ran a bunch of these templates. If you have an interest in them, send me an email with your mailing address. I'll be happy to stick one in an envelope and mail it to you. And that'll give you the size and information you need on that.
Sadly, I don't have a home wood shop yet, so I have to wait till the shop's open anyway.
Dallas, do you want to go ahead and move on and give them a chance to show anything they might have brought?
I sure
I
will.
want to know what Gary's handicap is.
I'm a 16, but I'm a hell of a putter.
Okay, thank you, Gary. But I'll tell you, I find it fascinating. And the more I learn about this, the more I realize how many facets there are to making this. I can see where 20 years of experience is showing up there. Hey guys, I know a lot of us have been working in our home shops. Anybody have anything they can share? Show us what they've been doing. Love to see something. We have a lot of people bashful, is what it sounds like.
Yeah, I made a little serving board. Let me go grab it real quick.
Good. And I know Rick has been working crazy on building a house. He showed us that the other day on the video. Marlo, how about you? What have you been doing? Marlo,
Yeah,
did
so
you drop off?
I made this serving board here out of a piece of live edge walnut, and I made a little mold and poured some epoxy with some mica powder and alcohol ink in it, and then kind of routed down the edges, shaved it down, made a nice fine sand, and that's our charcuterie board now. So
Cool.
Beautiful.
yeah. Thank you.
Nice.
Good. Anybody else?
Well,
Mike, you showed us something the other day. You don't have it right there, but it was a pretty interesting piece you had.
I've got one. If I can.
Okay.
Is this?
Well, John, what do you got there?
This is Mike McKelney. Can anyone hear this?
Yeah, we hear you, Mike.
Yep.
But you can't see me.
Yes,
Yep.
we can.
We
You
can.
can see it too.
Okay. Well,
You got more.
if I show you this, can you see that?
What is this, a test? Come on.
That's a turned tack shelter
It's all
for my accountant.
Shelter. I love it.
I thought that was for mice.
Olive wood, of course. Anyhow, there you go. And a variety of tacks. It's considered perhaps tacky, but whatever.
Oh, Mike.
Okay.
It's tacky.
Okay.
Okay.
In the
Well, guys,
John Ringer here.
yeah.
All right. Very nice. That was turned as well, was it?
I have no idea what's going on here.
I keep getting this weird screen in front of me.
Wow.
Okay.
Can you guys see that one?
Yes.
Oh, the background makes it very weird to look at.
This
was a cutting boards before they came into fashion. They became a half a dozen various and sundry wedding presents. When your
all right.
kids get old enough, they all start getting married. You have to give away wedding presents.
Actually, that looks like something they used on me in gym class back in high school.
That was the concept, yeah. Big paddle board.
With Dallas, I did make an experiment with using V-Carb Pro and my CNC.
Uh-huh.
My daughter has a little house for the kids. The windows were made out of plastic and started to break, so she said, could you use your 3D printer to make some window covers for the house? And I said, well, they're kind of long for my printer, but maybe I can do it on my CNC. So I learned how to use the molding path and stuff on the V-Carb, which was pretty interesting. And here's my first draft of
Wow.
putting molding around the top and then pocketing the back so it fits inside the window. So it's interesting what you can do with the software and the tools if you can figure out how to get through that process.
Very cool.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, Paul, you got anything going on?
In the interest of family support, just made the bread.
Well,
not necessarily wood related, but
that looks like a
it'll
putter.
go with that breadboard.
Since I've got two Pauls on, I'll ask Paul Duffield too.
That looks like a putter.
Hi. Unfortunately, what I'm working on is a little too big to bring upstairs here. But I'm working on a little dressing table with 4 drawers. Not dressing table, nightstand.
Well, the other thing Paul's been working on while he's been gone is he's made a new board to mount our new Bridge City hand tools at the shop. And he sent me a picture of it. He had a little difficulty with it. We're going to work through that detail, but he's made some places so we can get those really nice hand tools up and available to everybody in the shop when we're able to get back in there. Thanks, Paul, for doing that.
Oh, my pleasure. And I've been restoring a few of those donated block planes as well, which is kind of fun.
Good.
Hey, I'll do a walk around here, just a quick kitchen thing.
Okay. Well, boy.
So let's see, how do we do?
You're doing well.
Okay, there's sort of.
So the guys that don't know this, Rick made all the cabinets for his new home. And you can see that they just recently got finish on them. The doors and drawers or door fronts aren't on yet, but yeah, it's some beautiful work.
So it turned out,
Nicely done.
and we're obviously in the process of moving in.
There's Wendy back there. Hi, Wendy.
But just so anyway, that's where my life's been the last few months.
Very nice, Rick. Okay, guys, I think we're kind of slowing down. Unless somebody's got something they can else they want to share.
I've got one little thing here.
What do you have there, Chris?
Yes. Just a prototype of a coffee table, stacking coffee table I'm beginning to make a series of. I don't know if you can see me at the moment. I can't see.
Can.
Can you see a little table there?
Yes.
I'm trying to establish what is the best angle for a stacking table set.
Well, prototyping is a good way to do it. Looks like you made a nice little prototype. And that's using your eco thing, your wood saving
yeah, that's right.
Design.
You can see the shape of the legs that that's just from a 1x2 put through a router to get that shape. And you can then use this in a 1x2, 2x4 size, and can end up with just about making anything with a little bit more detail on the thing. There's a nice line that can be painted or stained, or you can actually put tiling on the back if you wanted to decorate it in a different way. It's a long story, but it appears to be coming together.
Good. Good.
This is Dan.
Hey, Dan.
I've got, for the holiday build, some ornaments that I thought would be a little unique.
Oh.
All right, very good.
And then this one from the scroll saw.
Did that on a scroll saw?
It's like Gandalf's wand. His staff.
Wow.
Small projects for a small shop.
Perfect. Well, guys, this was our first effort to bring this this medium together. Have a new meeting place. Won't be the address of the church. It'll be the address, a web address for a while. And if this works out and it's something you like, we'll proceed forward and do it again. But that also leads me to, we need to have our next guest speaker, next guest presenter. A lot of you guys are doing some really interesting things. We'd love to have somebody step forward and show us what you're doing and share some of the steps. That can be done from Prescott or from Milwaukee too, guys, David and Marlo. We'd love to have one of you step forward and take that on and take on a short session. It's not hard to do. Technology is not that difficult, and Mike and Jim and others work with us to help put this together as, in a way that the presenter doesn't have too much of a load as far as handling cameras or doing anything like that. You just need to show us what you're working on and share it. Travis, you're online. Do you want to just kind of give them a little preview of some of the other things we're thinking about using the conferencing for?
Sure. In general, we've had a lot of programs go offline. I mean, if you've been to the website lately, you've seen basically everything get canceled, from general meetings to classes to everything. And as both Dallas and Gary have said previously, there's an awful lot of desire out there to bring more of that back. And we're all constrained in what we can do. So when you think about those categories, things such as classes, such as special interest groups, such as show and tells, etc., they provide opportunity. But opportunity is just a word. It needs to be realized. So I'm just going to back up what Gary and Dallas have both appealed to, which is you guys have the content. You guys can bring this to life. And if it's done around projects you've done, ideas you want to share, things you want to teach, those are the things that are going to drive this forward. So to the extent that this grows and ramps and becomes important to us, is very much dependent upon how much you guys enjoy it, participate in it, make it happen on a more frequent basis. I think you've seen over the course of the last few of these that the technology is really not a big hurdle. It is pretty straightforward from an iPad or an Android phone to a Mac or a PC. It's just not that difficult. So to the extent that you've managed to join this conference today, you've already overcome almost all of the technical hurdle. If we can rely on people to stand in the background like Mike, who is actually the producer of this event, to take care of all the camera switching and muting, etc., for you, it is not going to be a big deal. So I just, again, reinforce what Dallas and Gary have appealed to. This thing flies if you step forward and share and participate, and it doesn't if you don't. Either way is okay. But in the meantime, we are all isolated, and this just seems like a really fun way to keep woodworking alive and interact with other people in the situations where we're tending to be a little bit lonely and isolated. So it's just an appeal to you folks to step forward, and we have ways of doing that. Check out sdfwa.org. There is a list of upcoming events. Right now, there's only one or two. There's going to be a list of completed events. And there's also a place for you to just submit ideas. Write Gary or Dallas or me directly, or just go ahead and put your idea into an email on that page. But this is how we can fuel this fire. This is how we can ramp it up if we want to. Anyhow, thank you, Dallas.
Okay. Gary, do you have anything else before we close out?
I would just want to build on what you and Travis both just said and just make sure everybody understands it doesn't need to be a half-hour presentation. You know, it could be, I would be interested in seeing, Dan, how you cut that ornament out on the scroll saw, you know, and it could be 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it takes to do that. So we could do a series of 2 or 3 or 4 people, you know, in an hour and have plenty of time to discuss each one. So all of you are doing something that the rest of us could benefit by. John Rieger, I'm thinking that, learning how you dye wood for those beautiful puzzles that you make would be very interesting. And
for sure.
I could go down the whole list, but please, as Travis mentioned, it goes forward only if everybody steps up and participates. So please give some thought to how you might want to do that. And even if you're a little nervous or not sure, give us a call and we'll walk you through what it takes. And you'll find it's a painless exercise. I've lived through it, so I can speak with authority.
Gary, Dallas, this is Rob. Yeah. Quick question. I noticed that during the presentation, it worked out well that Dallas had this separate camera that it looked like he was putting on his putters, and then it would flash back. And is it because he has a separate camera? How did that process work? Because it seems like it'd be helpful if we're giving one of these presentations to not try to hold your computer up at an angle. You know what I mean?
Yes, exactly. I've got a webcam on my desktop, which is the one that I had that I just oriented it. I put it on a tripod and oriented it down so I could put the putter and all of the still shots you saw were there. And then I also fired up my laptop, which is the image you saw when I was talking into it, or you saw me sitting there. So I used both of them. And yeah, it's really handy to have 2 of them. But if you don't have that capability, we might be able to come up with one to assist you if necessary. So
you probably make like a makeshift tripod of some sort too for your phone. Hold your phone camera or something.
Rob, I did one last week. We did a test run on this, and I did one used my laptop for the still camera, and I used my phone for my mobile one.
Okay, that makes sense. There's multiple ways, but you sign in twice. you basically sign in as on two different devices.
That's
Got it.
right. Exactly right. Okay. Okay, guys, thank you for joining us today. And this will be uploaded and will be available on the web for anybody, if you want to go back and just see one portion of something you're not sure. I understand that Travis is going to index this. It's going to be indexed, so you'll be able to say at what point did Gary show us how to do the epoxy, or different points. There'll be different pieces on there, so you can skip through and not have to watch the whole segment if you just want to go back and review one little piece. With that, thank you for joining us and stay safe. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks, guys. Great class.
How
Appreciate
do you
it.
want the feedback? In an email, or to put it on the comments on the YouTube when you post it? How you want it?
Email would be ideal.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you, everyone.
Great presentation.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys. Great to see everybody.
Stay healthy.
Thank you.
Stay home.
Guys.
Wash your hands.